This video is going to continue our lesson on databases. So you'll remember when we started, we created a people table, and the way that we did that was we entered field names along just by using this little click to add button over here on the right hand side, and each time we added a field we would give it a name, and then we would tell it what type of data was actually being put into that field. So our first name and our last name were text, whereas our date of birth was a number and it was formatted as a date. And so we've now got that table, we've populated this with test data, and we're then able to use this table to identify those people. Now there's a couple of tools here. You can see up here we've got filter tools. So if we wanted to just show the people who are in New South Wales, what we could do is we could filter that field, and we can tick or untick particular fields to filter that data. So you can see I've unticked all, and then I've said New South Wales, and by saying OK, it's now filtered that field just to show New South Wales people. So that's one of the first tools that you've got in the database to actually manipulate your data. If I turn that filter off again, I get everything back. You'll see that there's sort tools. So if I wanted to sort by their postcode so that I could group all of the people who are in similar areas together, then I can do that, and you'll see that that sorts by postcode. You're probably more likely to want to sort by last name. You'll see when we sort by postcode it does it numerically. If we sorted by last name, it would do it alphabetically. And because this is a date, you'll see if we sort this ascending, then it's actually going to put the earliest dates first and the later dates last. And so this isn't alphabetical. You can see if we come down here, it's got 5 and then 2. 5 would obviously come after 2. So alphabetically, that's not the right sort order, whereas because it's sorted by date, it's recognised the year, then the month, then the day in order to sort. So the sort is also a powerful tool there, and you can remove the sort just by pushing that, and they'll take it back to your original order. So there's manipulation tools here that allow you to analyse that data. Later on we're going to learn how to create queries as well. Now the second way we can create a table, because what we're going to do, we've now got our people at our event, and we want to say which people are taking part in which activities. So we're going to create a second table with a list of possible activities for the people to be involved in, and then we're going to create a third table which links the people to the activities. So we're going to go through that process now. So we'll need to create those tables. So if you come across to the menus across the top, you'll see there's one that says create. If we choose create, the first table we created was just using the table. You'll see that there's an option there. Instead of creating from a table, you can actually create a table design. And so this uses a thing called design view, which does a data dictionary for the table. Rather than having it looking like a table, when we choose we want to create with a table design, you'll see that we get down here a list of fields that we can enter in, and it asks us to describe the fields rather than the entries. So remember, this is going to be our events table. So the first thing we're going to do is have an event ID, and rather than entering in the data, we can go straight across to the data type, and we can say that this is actually going to be an auto number field. And so you'll see the event ID is automatically going to be a number, and down here in the properties for that field, you'll see that we get the option of saying whether or not this is an indexed field. The index means that we can have unique identities, and at the moment this is saying yes, it's indexed, but duplicates are okay. We want the event ID to be unique for every event. So we're going to change that and say yes, it's going to be an identity, it's going to be indexed, but it's going to not allow duplicates. So if we choose yes, no duplicates, that means our auto number is not going to let events have the same number. Then we're going to get an event name. Remember, it's best to use camel case when you're doing the names rather than having spaces. And the event name is just going to be a short text. You'll see down here in the properties, the short text has 255 characters. If you needed more than that or less than that, you can change that, and that will increase or decrease the size of your database. So we've got an event ID, an event name, and then we're going to say when the events are going to occur. So we're going to have an event date field. And so just in here, that's not going to be a short date, that's going to be a date and a time. And you'll see once again you can choose formats for your dates and times, and so that way your data is consistent across your database. So I'm going to go with the 12th of November 2005 written like that first option. So we've got our event ID, our event name, our event date. We would also have event locations. And we should use camel case, so I'm going to get rid of that space. And this is just going to be a short text as well, so that we can enter in where they actually are. Now you could go on and add event contacts and all sorts of other details about the events. I'm just going to stick with those 4 fields for this one. Now at the moment it's called Table 1, so we're going to hit save, and instead of being called Table 1, we're going to call this Events. And say OK, and it's going to say there's no primary key. Do you want to define one? It's going to suggest that we can create a primary key. I'm going to say no, because I actually want this field here to be the primary key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that and say that this is the primary key for my events, and that way that's going to be the unique identifier for every event that we create. I should have done it when I actually created that field. Okay, so now we've got our events table. Now we can come across here, and you see up the top here we've got the option to view this table. And so when we go to view, rather than having to build the table in design view, you'll see that it takes us, when it saves it, straight into the table that we can now enter data into. So by using that create and creating in design view, creating a data dictionary for the table, it means that our table can then be have data directly entered into it. So now I'm going to enter a couple of events. So my first event is going to be a dancing event. The date, you can see I get the date picker because I said that this was going to be a date time, and so I can then choose the date that that's going to happen. I could enter in the time as well. And the event location, I'm going to say that's going to happen in the school hall. My second event could be dinner, and it's going to happen on the 23rd as well, and then it's going to happen in the tram area. There we are. Dinner, dancing. Let's say that our third event could be some sports. Let's make that one happen on the 24th. And it's going to happen over in Govinda. After sports, we'll have a games night. It's going to also happen on the 24th. And it's going to happen in the library. And our last event is going to be video night. It's going to happen on the 25th. And it's going to happen in a theatre. Alright, so we've now got 5 different events. You'll see we've got a people and we've got our events. Once you've got your people and your events, you would need to create another table, and what you could do is you can identify the people who are going to events just by their numbers. So if we use the people ID, so if Tony is going to the dancing, then the people ID would be number 1, and the dancing ID would also be number 1. And that would create then a link between Tony and dancing, and when we actually run our queries, we could add an extra row for every person who's coming to the dancing, and that would create a link between those things that we can then query and build up attendance lists for. I'll show you how to do that in our next video.